How do? My name is Andrew Hancock and I am a VMware technical architect from Yorkshire in the United Kingdom. I have worked with VMware since their birth in 1998, so that's been a quarter of a century now. I've been working with the VMware product catalogue. Some of my close friends say if you cut Andy in half, it reads VMware like a stick of rock from Blackpool Pleasure Beach. I have now written over 130 articles and recorded over 30 hours of VMware vSphere 7 and 8 videos for Experts Exchange, and received 40 Expert Exchange awards over the last 11 years working with the Expert Exchange community. I am currently the overall #1 point earner in the Hall of Fame. I am honoured to have been accepted into the VMware vExpert program since 2011, and I'm currently a VMware vExpert Pro for the last 4 years.
And welcome back to another episode of Hancock's VMware Half Hour. Okay, so we're going to continue in this video to explore the HCI fling, HCIbench fling. Now, fling is a community-derived piece of software, appliance, function that you can download from the flings.vmware.com, and I'll put the HCIbench link in that. And we're referring to the proactive test that we can do on our VMware vSAN. And you may remember in the VMware vSAN that I did, if you've been following, that there are some very basic tests, proactive tests it calls them. Under monitor vSAN proactive test, you can basically quick a run test. And I would recommend that you actually basically do this if you've built a production vSAN or a home lab vSAN. You've got the test there. Just click run test, and it will basically create a very small virtual machine very quickly on all 3 hosts, just to check that things are operating as they should. I have another home lab here whereby if I do run test, it actually basically fails on a particular host, and I've still not really gotten to the bottom of what that is, but I think it could possibly be networking. So it does actually basically reveal issues. And I also had an issue earlier on in this lab whereby if I click run test, it turned around and said something like not available in the current state of the host. It was almost as if the host was in maintenance mode, but not was in maintenance mode, and it didn't matter what I did in restarting services, but bouncing the host quickly actually resolved the issue. The same we can do network performance tests, and you may remember if you are following these videos and you saw the previous video, that a couple of our servers in the list here were actually under 9,000 megabits a second, which I was a bit surprised at. And all I've done is run the test again, and those figures are now in excess of 9,000, which is what I'm really actually expecting. So when you look at storage performance tests, it actually basically turns around and tells you for the storage performance test, use HCIbench. And if you click HCIbench, then you actually basically get taken to the fling. So there's not really any need for me to put in the description, but I will actually basically put it in the description. So we've already downloaded the OVA. You can read a little bit about it there, which basically says it's a hyper-converged infrastructure benchmark. Essentially, it's a load of tools that allow you to import the OVA, go to a web server interface, select some tests, click a button, and it will produce some lovely graphs. Now, I generally, when I'm creating a production vSAN or even a home lab vSAN, I actually like to use HCIbench to run the vExpert and the FIFO tests. I document those PDFs so I can actually basically see what our performance was at the start of using a production vSAN. And then as we ramp up using vSAN, I run those tests again just to see whether or not there's anything obvious in the networking or on the flash drives that are basically causing contention and bottlenecks within our environment. So I've already downloaded a HVA, and okay, so I'm going to right click our EE cluster. I'm going to click deploy OVF template to deploy this template. and I've saved it in my downloads here. So I'm going to click next. I'm quite happy with the virtual machine name. I'm going to click next. I'm going to put it on ESXi 007. There was no reason why I couldn't have just actually said use the EE cluster, and it would have actually basically worked out where to place it. But I'm just going to click next. It's going to have a little think. This is just checking the OVF configuration of the number of cores, the amount, download size, and the size of the disk, followed by next. I'm going to accept the license agreement. I'm not going to use our vSAN data store. I'm going to use a data store that we've got here called Rust, which is HDDs, because I don't want any interaction going on the vSAN data store when we actually run the HCIbench OVA tests. So I don't want it to actually basically alter the benchmarks in any way. Management network, I'm just actually going to use the VM network I have here in the lab, which is 192.168.182. It's now complaining about property value, so I need to drop in a password, the appliance. I'm going to use DHCP. So I'm going to click next, and I'm going to click finish, and I'm going to wait. So I'm going to disappear. I need to go and grab a coffee and a soft drink, and I'll come back when we power up the HCIbench appliance for the very first time. So I'll be back shortly. Okay, I'm back. Deployment completed. The keen-eyed amongst you may actually notice in the background here we're cloning our VMware vCenter Server 7 to a vCenter Server backup. That's for the next video that I'm going to do on vCenter Server HA. I just want a belts and braces backup of my vCenter Server just in case everything goes peaked on. Okay, so HCIbench. I'm going to click power on. And hopefully that's just going to boot up. I'm going to launch a web console. We can actually basically just watch that boot up. And I'm hoping that we can get an IP address, we can log in, and we can have a look at the web interface. And then we can actually start doing some tests. But I'm going to hold off doing those tests because at the moment I'm actually cloning vCenter Server to our vSAN data store. So I don't want any other activity going on a vSAN data store while we conduct these benchmarks. So let's just have a little look, see if we've got an IP address yet, because this is actually running on a DHCP network. So yeah, we've got 192.168 issued from, so I'm just going to basically bob up here. From what I remember, it does actually use a special port. Yeah, okay, so these are the location of the log files. These are the location of where we actually basically go to look at our log files. And if we actually put 8080, and then we actually get to the administration page, where we're going to need that username and password that we specified before. So I'm just going to use that password. I'm going to sign in. Okay, so this is quite simple, really, where we're just going to start filling in vCenter host names, VM folders, which are optional. So I'm just going to bob on and start filling this in. Okay, so I've just quickly filled in all those values. I'm sure that you didn't want to see me doing that. So all I've done is filled in the host name, the data center name. I've created a folder where the HCIbench VMs for testing are going to be created. I've selected the vSAN datastore, which is the datastore we want to test, where the VMs are going to be actually created. vCenter username and password, cluster name. I've not actually specified any network names, storage policies at the moment, or resource pool names. I'm going to clear the read and write cache before each test case. I'm going to turn on vSAN debug mode. I put all the credentials in there for my hosts. And I'm going to select easy run. I'm going to use the FIO benchmarking tool. And this gives me 4 easy run workloads to run. I'm going to click save config, which will save it. And then I'm going to click the validate config, which is just going to check and test that all those values that I put in there are correct. So we're just going to hit validate config, and that's going to sit there, basically run through a load of little tests very, very quickly to check that our configuration is pucker before we can click the run test. So I'm going to let that run in the background, and I'm going to bob off and I'm going to get a drink. I'll catch you later. So just back quickly, because I noticed very, very quickly, if we look at it actually turned around and noticed that one of our hosts, 9, doesn't have SSH enabled. So I've done a video on this before. I'm sure by now you know how to turn on SSH. So I'm just going to basically turn SSH shell. So they're both running. I'm going to go back again. I click close, and I'm going to validate the test again, and I'll come back when that's completed. Okay, so I'm back. Looking through the logs, the only warning that I've currently got is that we've got DRS enabled, fully automated, which could actually distribute the virtual machines across the hosts. So just another reminder basically to go back and turn off DRS in our cluster. So that's going to go to settings. DRS is on, so I'm just going to turn it off. And we don't have any resource groups to save. Okay, there's a VApp here, which is actually, so I'm going to delete the nested vSAN lab that we built. We don't need that anymore, so I'm just going to delete that. And once that's VApp's been removed, we can then turn off DRS for our HCIbench testing. So if we go back to our cluster, go to settings again. So DRS is turned off on our cluster now. DRS is turned off. So I want to do again. I'm just going to validate that config again, just to check that it actually basically comes back and says that everything is pucker and we're ready to go to start our testing. Success. All the configuration checks are valid, and we are ready to start conducting benchmarking of our vSAN datastore. So there's nothing more for me to do than select the benchmark that we require. So I'm going to just choose these in order: 4K, 70% read, 100% random, and I'm going to click Start Test. And HCIbench is now going to start testing. That's it. And I will repeat for the other 3 tests. So I'll complete all those, And I'll come back at the end and I'll show you the log files, and I'll show you the lovely PDF reports whilst this is basically setting up, ready to run these tests for the afternoon. So I will come back shortly. I'll kick off the other tests and I'll come back at the very end and we can start having a little look at some of the results. So this is the first test which has finished. So we're going to repeat, and we're just going to basically select the next test, and we're just basically going to save config, and we're going to basically just say start test and let the test carry on running. So I'll be back when that test finishes. And finally, we're back. It does take several hours to complete all those tests. But if you then select the results, you can then actually basically go into each of these folders and you can look at the PDFs, or you can actually basically go to the website without the 8080 on the end, and you can get a directory listing, and you can look at the results, and you can look at the easy run, and you can look at the PDFs. And I'll upload all these PDFs links so that you can actually basically download these as well. So that's it. That's how we use HCIbench to run benchmarks on our vSAN environment. And I actually like to use HCIbench. One, not only basically that I've got some benchmarks to actually basically look to see and looking at all the statistics to see whether or not that we've actually basically got any issues with our environment. But it also helps to actually look back at if for some reason your vSAN environment is not actually performing as it should, and you've actually basically got some baseline benchmarks to look at. And there are obviously endless configuration options that you can actually select if you actually basically want to increase and use more VMs, more threads, more disks, really to challenge your vSAN environment, to look at what the maximum number of IOPS that you can actually basically get out of your environment. And if you actually run through HCIbench for a number of days, I think it certainly will give you a good confidence that your vSAN environment is then ready for production. So thanks so much for watching this series. There have been a number of videos that I'll put all in the description for you to follow in how we create VDS, how we actually create our vSAN, how we actually run some proactive tests on our vSAN, and how we actually basically configure and use HCIbench. So thanks so much for watching Hancock's VMware Half Hour, and come back soon for more VMware vSphere videos. Thank you very much for watching.